Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning into the Atheist Reformation here on YouTube for the Discussions with a Theist show. Joining me today is Michael Lofton of Reason and Theology. How you doing, Michael?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I've come on
Yeah.
y'all's channel a few different times. You've come
Right.
on mine once before, so I kind of hope we keep this
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
relationship rolling because it seems to work out for both of us. I get to have some interesting discussions and sometimes meet some cool people. Like for anybody who doesn't know, for all of you who liked the interview that I did with Dr. Robert Price, you honestly, in no small part, have Michael here to thank, because had he not invited me to come on and in his show in their first interview with Dr. Price, I would not have gotten an introduction with him, and he probably wouldn't even have given me the time of day had I emailed him without having spoken with him first. So,
Dr. Price is a really interesting guy. He's
oh
he's
man,
a
he is a
character. I'm
trip.
glad that you had him on the show. That
Did you actually go and watch that interview that I
I
did with
haven't I
him?
haven't seen it yet. I need to
You
see it.
should. As of right now,
Yeah.
it's still my most viewed
Is that right?
video on this
Okay.
channel. Like
I,
I've
I can
got.
imagine so. The
Oh
guy is
yeah,
extremely captivating and
he
entertaining in his
is,
speech,
and
rhetoric, everything.
I'm just so upset because like I haven't had time to like just sit down and
Yeah,
burn through his latest book, Jesus
right.
Christ Superstition, because I want him back on the show and I want to talk about that book with him really bad.
I have it too. I haven't had the chance to read it. I mean, I have a million and one things that I need to read on my reading list, and so that's just
Yeah,
one of them,
yeah,
Yeah.
same here.
Yeah, but hopefully I'll get to it pretty soon.
Oh
I
yeah,
do have a
definitely.
copy though. I skimmed through it, but I can't
Hmm.
say that I've read it thoroughly or anything like that.
Right. I think I've skimmed the first couple of chapters and whatnot, but
But
I'm
look,
working on doing a deep dive now. So
yeah, so you're gonna do a review of it.
I plan on doing a review of it, and then after I review it and everything, I want to try and get Dr. Price back on
Yeah,
my channel and talk to him some more about it. And if I have any questions about it, I can go ahead and field those there.
that's a good idea. Right.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
anyway, today, girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, all that fun stuff. Today we're talking about morality.
Mm,
And just like with every other show before, I've had the person who's coming on who is of the theistic persuasion choose the topic so we can sit and discuss it. Maybe I wouldn't say debate it, but kind of engage in a little bit more heated discussion at a few key points where we really disagree about something, and then kind of go from there. So,
mhm.
Michael, take it away, man.
When I was doing my undergrad, one of the few courses that I would actually say was beneficial at the institution I went to was a philosophy course. And I don't have a lot of good things to say about the philosophy professor, but we did have a real.
Oh, Michael, how's your video feed doing?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I
Did
can
it
hear you
go
now.
out?
You're back now. You're back now.
Okay. Let me know if it cuts out again. I don't know. Every now and then I have internet connections here.
Hmm.
Could be something like that. But yeah, let me know if it goes out. So far, I've been able to hear you. Um, when I was doing this class, we had a book on philosophy. It was just kind of, regular
Hmm.
standard introduction to philosophy. And it had snippets in there of just various philosophers. And one of them, of course, was Socrates. And one of the dialogues that they decided to go over was his interaction with the priest Euthyphro. And, long story short, what happened is I want to say Socrates was on his way to court or something like that. And
Hmm.
he encounters this priest, the priest of the Greek gods, Euthyphro. And here Euthyphro is prosecuting his own father. And so Socrates is intrigued, like, you're really going to prosecute your own father? What's going on here? Well, okay, it turns out that his father had left some of his slaves out overnight, left them to the elements, and they died. So that was
Okay.
considered, inhumane. So he was prosecuting his own father because he felt that what his father did was impious. And Socrates thought, well, wow, look, you're a priest. You should know what piety is. And here you are, you're actually prosecuting your own father over impiety. This is intriguing to me because I want to know what piety is.
Hmm.
This has been on my mind. please explain to me. You're very well qualified, clearly. What is piety? And of course, Euthyphro gives him all kinds of different answers. Well, it's what the gods consider. It's, prayers to the gods, all kinds of different answers. There was about
Basically, it all kind of boils down to appealing to the authority of the deity.
well, there was more than that. There was about 5 different answers that he gave, but with each instance, what Socrates did was he showed that um, at best you're giving me particular examples of piety, but you're
Hmm.
not giving me a general definition that really holds water at the end of the day, that applies to all cases of piety.
Hmm.
So, if he would give an alleged definition, he would just say, well, that doesn't apply here, and he would start to poke holes in it. And
Hmm.
what was going on here is Socrates would do this with many other people, not just Euthyphro. And what he's effectively doing is he's trying to say that you guys talk about justice, y'all talk about piety, you talk about holiness, you talk about, all these different things. But at the end of the day, all you can do is you can point me to particular examples of them. You can't give me any kind of general definitions.
Hmm.
And that intrigued me because I started thinking, you know what, that's a really good point. How do you define piety? How do you define goodness, which is what we're going to be talking about today?
Hmm.
How do you define these things? Any kind of answer I would give are generally particulars, and they don't apply to the whole. So I think that one of the intriguing solutions that I found was when I was reading through Aquinas. What he does is he shows that the way that we can understand, for instance, goodness, he talks about goodness, truth, beauty, and he's using the term goodness a little bit differently than moral goodness and how we're using it here, but I'm still
Hmm.
I'm going to say that it's still applicable. What he basically does is he says the way that you can know that something is good is there has to be an ultimate good, a maximal being of goodness by which you can judge other particular goods. Those particular things that we all point to when we try to give a definition, they don't mean anything unless you have an actual standard of goodness. And what Aquinas was doing is he was solving that problem of the universals by saying God is that ultimate standard. He is the maximal being of goodness, truth, and beauty. And if you don't have an objective standard, this maximal being of goodness, you have nothing by which you can judge it. You have no standard by which you can judge it. Just like if I said, okay, 12 inches, on a ruler, if I spoke about
Hmm.
12 inches, well, if none of us had a ruler, we wouldn't exactly know the actual standard of what 12 inches is until we get a ruler and we can say, okay, here's the standard of what we call 12 inches. And now we can measure different things up against it. And if it fits, great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't actually meet up to the standard. So if
Okay,
I,
but a question I would have at that point is talking about the ruler, talking about inches and whatnot. Measurement in and of itself, how we measure things is arbitrary.
Mhm,
So
sure,
to me, that strikes me as
that's an
I'm not gonna
analogy.
say a bad analogy, just kind of one that
It's
doesn't
just an
seem to
analogy.
quite fit
With
the
every
case.
analogy, there's not
Right.
absolute.
You're never going to have just a perfectly analogous
Exactly. That's why it's
situation.
an analogy.
And that's kind of why I wanted to bring that up was just so, in no circumstances is going to be something that is perfectly analogous to the point you're trying to make. Um, and that's something that just kind of annoys the hell out of me more than anything else.
I
When
think
people sit
analogies
there
are
and
still
gripe
useful
about the
though.
analogy that somebody else uses. I mean, like, I get if it's just an outright, completely terrible analogy, that's one thing. But you're talking about morality and measuring goodness by a standard, and then you're applying that the deity God is that
Don't get
standard.
fixated on the analogy. You could throw my analogy away on rulers. Throw it out the window. It doesn't
Right.
matter.
That's kind of again. That's why I'm bringing that up. Is so it's like people, if you don't like the analogy, just don't bother with
Well,
it.
no, I think it's still useful to use that analogy
True.
because that's the very purpose of an analogy is it is giving us some element of
Hmm.
truth in trying to convey, some other element of truth. Now,
Right.
what I'm effectively getting at beyond any kind of analogies is I would like to know, how can I know what is a moral act apart from an ultimate standard, an ultimate maximal being of morality? Now, if you have a solution, I'm all ears. I'd love to know, because at the end of the day, I think that unless we have this being, this maximal being of goodness, I think that any kind of answer we give on morality is going to ultimately just be subjective. It's going to be my opinion on what is good versus your opinion versus that nation's opinion versus this group's opinion, but it's still going to be subjective at the end of the day.
Right.
I'd like to know
But
an
the thing
objective.
is, I guess with one of the bones of contention that we would have is the argument of whether or not morality has to be objective, because we have no demonstration of morality being objective. Um, a good example of this is like when I look at morality, I look at it from a relativistic standpoint. And the reason why is because the reason why I agree with it is because it makes sense to me in that, and this helps if you have a bit of an understanding of physics, is that all motion is relative. There is no such thing as absolute motion in physics. Everything is moving or acting within what's referred to as an inertial framework, such as like me picking up this little sauce cup thing and dropping it and moving it around versus a space shuttle orbiting the planet or you driving in a car. These are all inertial frameworks in which motion takes place. Because if you take a snapshot of any particular instant, you don't see any motion happening. So there is no such thing as absolute motion, which makes motion in and of itself relative. It's relative to the framework that it exists in. It's relative to the framework that it's functioning in. And that's the way I see morality as a whole, is it's a relative thing. And we see this exemplified time and time again throughout everything from culture to situational ethics, value ethics, even going on back into ancient times, prehistory. Like, we see evidence of it on how morality changes based on the culture, the time, the geographic location. And so those are your moral frameworks in which the morality is being determined for those actions. That doesn't mean we're going to agree with them. That doesn't mean somebody else in another nation is going to agree with them. But it means that it is still going to be subjective no matter what. And there's no demonstration that it has to be anything but that. Because we can use this subjective morality. We can see the moral situation as it is, and we can make objective statements about it, but we cannot make objective statements of morality itself.
So let me ask then a question.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say then that if morality is ultimately subjective, that there are no acts that are universally, in other words, in all places and in all times and for all cultures, are immoral? Would you agree with that? There are no instances in which a particular act is immoral for all cultures at all times in all instances.
No, I cannot think of anything that would be considered completely unacceptable by every single culture.
Okay. No, I'm not asking would it be completely acceptable by every single culture. That's not what I'm
Oh,
asking.
okay.
What I'm asking is, would you say that there um, is a particular act? Let me stop being obscure. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
The unjust killing of the innocent. Is there ever an instant in which this would be a moral act? I'm not asking what does a particular nation think it's okay. Not
Mm-hmm.
asking that. I'm asking, are there ever any instances in which the unjust killing of an innocent human being is moral?
Well, the problem is you're still using subjective terminology throughout that entire statement.
Mhm,
Just and unjust, again, with your example of Socrates, we can
mhm,
only give examples of what justice is. We have
mhm,
no definition of justice,
mhm.
no objective definition of
So
it.
let me
So
give you a
it'd
better
be
one.
subjective.
So let me give you a better instance. Is there ever an occasion in which it is good for an adult to murder a 2-year-old for no other reason other than for the simple pleasure of killing them?
Okay, so
For no other reason. I'm not considering it. I'm saying for no other reason other than for the simple pleasure of killing them. Is there
okay.
ever an instance in which that would be moral?
To me, no. But there again, at the end of the day, we're both going to be speaking from a bias of what our morality is, how we've grown up, how we view the world.
Right.
So at that point, it's
But
not
you would
moral
agree that
relativism isn't so much about describing any particular act as being always a bad thing or always a good thing or anything like, or something is almost always a good thing, anything like that. It's more about just the view that a moral judgment is true or false, and that is relative to a particular standpoint. Usually it has to do with culture or a period of time. Because
But it sounded like you agreed that there was an act here that is always wrong for all cultures in all instances.
no, it's an act that I would always view
That
as
you,
immoral.
yeah, I'm talking about you. You
Right, but
believe.
even still, that's just my particular view on
Sure.
it.
Okay.
I didn't grow up. There may be a society in which they view that as a moral
I
act.
understand, but I'm asking, regardless of whether or not they think it's okay, I'm asking objectively, is there ever an instance in which that would be morally okay in your estimation?
In my estimation, I
Your
don't
estimation.
see a point.
Exactly.
I don't see a point.
Exactly.
That
So to
being
me, it sounds
said,
like you do believe.
that is still a subjective answer though. It's
You
always going to be a subjective
you
answer.
subjectively, as an individual, you're a subjective being. I mean, we all grant that. But you as a subjective being believe that there are certain acts that are always objectively immoral. So what you just told me is that there is an objective standard to morality. There
No,
are.
actually, no, I didn't say there was an objective standard. I said that based on my opinion, my values, my ethics, my views on morality, I don't see a point where I would agree with another culture or another person that doing that would be a good thing to do.
So here's my problem. Let's say you have another guy who's, right there in the room with you, and he
Okay.
says, no, there are some instances in which it's okay for an adult to torture a 2-year-old for their simple pleasure and murder them for that purpose and no other purpose, not considering anything else, but just the simple pleasure of it. Now, if they say, I subjectively believe that there are instances in which that is moral, how can you say that they are wrong?
I can't, but what I can say is this. I can say to that person, okay, we disagree on this. I need to know what you think makes this okay. What circumstance makes this okay, or makes this good, makes this not bad, whatever you want to call it. And then we can have a discussion about that and then look for whether or not one of us is right or wrong on that one,
Yeah, but I
or
mean, at
more
the end
right
of
or
the
more
day,
wrong.
if their mind is convinced and you're convinced, I mean, we can't practically function like that in society. I mean, we have to have some kind of law. So at the end of the day,
Right,
what do we do?
but we don't make laws based off of just strictly biblically derivative morals.
I'm
I
not
mean,
asking, I'm not
if
even talking about the Bible here. I
okay,
haven't mentioned the Bible once.
well, just in general. I mean,
Throw out the Bible. I don't care about the Bible in this discussion.
okay.
Well, everything that I say is at 100%. We're just talking pure philosophy and reason. Throw out the Bible. You can ignore that I'm a Christian because I'm going to speak as 100% a philosopher at the moment.
Okay, that's cool.
So my thing is, all right, when it comes to how we're going to practically live in a society, I mean, you and I can sit here, in this stream and talk about these things and say, well, there's some instances in which a person might think it's okay and you think it's not okay. But at the end of the day, we can't function like that in reality. We have to have some kind of government that, makes laws that is going to uphold what is just. But if we don't really know what is justice, how can we have a government that upholds justice if it's all relative?
By
Um,
watching how our justice system has evolved in this country since its inception. Our justice system has changed quite a lot,
mhm,
and it has continually changed. You can go all the way back to the times of, say, the Stella of Law from Hammurabi. There are things that are on that would not be considered lawful
sure.
today or just today. And so as
Mhm.
time progresses, as society evolves, things change.
Yeah, because I
It's designed to be a self-correcting system as
eh,
much as it possibly can be. And it
well,
changes with culture, it changes with technology, it changes with societal advancement. And so, yeah, we see changes over time. We would see it if the world was morally relative, if we saw if morals were relative, it would behave in the exact same way that we see it today.
but if everything is constantly evolving, then we're really never going to get to a point in which we can know justice objectively. So we're just going to
Correct.
constantly have evolving systems.
Yes.
Okay. Do you not see the inherent problem with that? That means there really is no objective basis by which I can judge what has happened in any other culture.
Hmm.
Because I'm not at all saying America is the standard
No,
of
no, I'm not
justice
saying
or
America is
any
the standard
particular
either.
country.
What
No,
I
no
am saying
particular
is that
country.
America is for the most part, is the individual standard for most Americans, by
Mhm.
which we see and we view through the lens of the American justice system most
Right.
other countries and cultures. So, yeah,
Well, let
that's
me ask you this. I guess this might actually help if I
yeah.
find this out from you. Are there anything that you would say the American political system allows for that you think is immoral? Is there anything that our government thinks is legal or says is legal that you say is is wrong? It should not be legal.
That it should not be legal.
Mhm. Because it's wrong, not because it's impractical or something, but because it's wrong.
Because
It's
okay,
because it's evil, because it's bad.
so purely because it's wrong.
Yeah, because it's bad.
Okay, I would say the Patriot Act.
Okay. Okay.
I have problems with the Patriot Act.
Okay.
Big problems.
What specifically?
Um, Data mining,
Mm.
apparently on what I would consider unlawful and unconstitutional data mining and gathering of information on individuals, this, that, and the other. When we get
You
into
know,
politics, we're kind of in my arena here. So,
yeah, yeah, I would probably agree with you. I remember one time I went to open a bank account. The first time I ever heard of the Patriot Act, I was
hmm.
trying to open a WAMU account over in New York, and
Oh boy,
I had one form of ID on me, and of course that wasn't sufficient. It was
nope.
okay a month before, but
Right.
right after the Patriot Act, no, it's
Hmm.
not okay. I have to have two forms of ID. So I agree with you. I hate the Patriot Act.
Well, see, I hate the Patriot Act because it spies on the American citizenry.
Fair enough.
It legalized spying on people.
Okay. Now, so it would seem that you would probably then say that I'd imagine the communists,
Yeah, I
weren't
disagree
doing.
with communism. I don't like
Yeah,
communism.
I figured.
It's
Okay.
a crap system of government. It's a crap
Okay.
economic policy. It's just crap all around.
But so now when you're judging the American system, the communist regime on this particular point, you're going to say this is just based on your subjective opinion, but there's really no inherent reason why what they're doing is bad. There's no inherent objective reason. It's just my personal opinion. Privacy in
For the
and of
most part,
itself
yes.
is
Well,
so
so as
privacy
far
in and
as
of itself is not a good. It is just something that you, as you know, you subjectively think is right.
well, we can make some objective statements about privacy in and of itself when we
Mhm.
look at fields of study like psychology.
Mhm.
And we've discovered through looking at that privacy is actually something that human beings do need a certain
Mhm.
modicum of, or they at least need the perception of privacy.
No, I agree with you here. Now I think we're really getting somewhere because what you just did is you told me that privacy is somewhat measured by our needs as humans. You based
Right.
it on us. Is that correct?
Yes, our
Okay.
needs as humans. In particular, one of the best measurements, it's probably a little outdated by this point, would be Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I think you're making a really good point here, and I agree with you. But I want to point out that there is something objective, and I think that you would agree here. There's something
Hmm.
objective to what you just said. You
Hmm.
grounded privacy in human nature.
Right, but I didn't ground the morality of privacy in human nature.
What's
What
the
I did
difference?
was I was able to make an objective statement about reality based on some other field of study, and through that I can make a value judgment and adjust the morality of what would be considered moral to match what is beneficial to us as human beings.
But you're saying an act that violates privacy is objectively immoral because it goes against some a need of human nature. To me, you've grounded this thing.
I've drawn
uh,
a link between a subjective action and an objective measurement, yes, but that does not make the initial point itself objective. I made a subjective point based off objective information.
I think some of this turns on the way we're using the term subjective and objective. I think
Okay.
we both agree you and I are subjective beings. We can every judgment that you make in one sense is subjective. I'm going to grant that
Mm-hmm.
100%. But what I'm saying is I think that you as a subjective human being can subjectively latch onto an objective moral standard, an objective measurement, and you can then use that to judge particular acts and say that they are immoral or moral. I think that you as a subjective being can latch hold of objectivity, and that objectivity that is external to us is what I'm referring to, because I don't believe that goodness is inherent, that is measured by me. I think that there is something that is good. Let's talk about privacy. I
Mm-hmm.
think that there are those standards of privacy that are true even if there were no human being left on the place, left on this planet. So if there were no longer any human beings ever, I think that there is still objectively out there, external to us, that morality of privacy. And if there were any humans, it would be immoral to do these particular acts that violate their privacy. Would you say that if there were no human beings, there's no longer any concept of privacy objectively?
Yes, I would say that.
Why is that?
Because we know of no other instance in which privacy as a concept has ever been derived of from anywhere but what we think about it, what we discuss as it, what we consider it to be.
Concepts are then basically dependent on you as
Us. Yes.
us as mind, right? Now there's a sense in which I would somewhat agree with you, because let me put it like this: as a philosopher
Mm-hmm.
who believes in, naturally speaking, a god, I'm not naming who the god is or anything specific about, just a god from natural revelation, I would say that um, if you didn't have any human beings, you really couldn't have any kind of standard of morality. Here's where I would locate that standard of morality ultimately: in the being and mind of God. I would say that there's still a mind out there that conceives of, what's moral and immoral. And if you didn't have this being, I would agree with you. Without any human beings, there wouldn't be a concept without a mind to know the concept. So there's a sense in which I would agree with some of what you're saying, but there's other reasons why I would say that, well, even if there's no human left, there's still that ultimate eternal mind that knows these objective truths. But then we
Right,
have
but
to
the
go
issue
into
you have
other
to get
reasons
into
why.
is we have to discuss the reasons for
Exactly.
existence and
Exactly.
the arguments contained within
Right.
that.
Right.
And
And
so,
that's a different point. So I'm going to place it on the side. That's why I'll just say
but
I'll
here's the
qualify
thing
my
though.
agreement.
Here's the thing that we can say about that though, and it's
Mhm,
interesting that you said that. So, absent any human beings, you
mhm,
have the mind of a deity
mhm.
that makes these judgments of what is moral and what is not.
Well, let me maybe
Well,
nuance that. I wouldn't say God makes judgments on what is moral, because I don't think that
but
something is
but
moral
but
because
that
it
entity
exists.
defines what morality is. Yes.
I think that that entity is what morality is, not in defining or something is good because he says is good. He is that standard
So you're
of
saying that this
goodness and
entity is
truth.
the personification of what morality
I
is?
wouldn't say personification. He's he, what we would say is he is the maximal being of
Right. To
goodness.
quote Alvin Plantinga, yeah.
Well, not necessarily him, because you
He's
can
the one that
find
came up
this.
with the MGB concept, or
No,
well,
you can
he
find
called
this
he's the one that
straight in the
called it
Summa.
MGB.
You find this in Aquinas. He refers to God as this maximal being, and of course, this is
Mhm.
not really even new to Aquinas. He's drawing off
He's
the
drawing
work of
from our
Aristotle.
Aristotle.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
wouldn't say this is new to Plantinga. I mean, he might have developed some
No,
things here.
I think he's just the newest player on the field that's like really churning out
Mm,
content about it. Is
mm,
more probably the more appropriate thing to say as far as that goes.
I don't know. I'd have to look further into his concept of it. I'm more here thinking of the Aristotelian,
Hmm.
um, Thomistic understanding of
Oh,
maximal being.
while we're in this kind of a natural pause here, I do want to
Mhm.
go ahead and tell everybody, anybody in the chat, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat now. Comments as well, if you want them read, please, make a statement saying so. And once we hit about the 1 hour mark, we're gonna stop and we're gonna go ahead and address as many questions as we possibly can. Because Michael, I think you do have some other stuff you got to do today.
Yeah.
So overall, this show will probably run at max about an hour and a half,
Mhm.
and we're a half hour in. So I want to let everybody know we're at the half hour mark.
Mhm.
Put your questions in the chat. We will get to as many of them as we can. And I'm
Mhm.
seeing a lot of chat flow on the comments on the
I
live feed.
wasn't able to see any of the chat. I didn't know that there was any.
If you click on the comments tab,
Uh-huh.
you
Uh-huh.
should be able to view the live chat.
Okay, here it is. I got you.
Yeah.
I see.
Yep.
Awesome.
Gregorian's on there saying that we really need to have Bob back on. I'm like, dude, I
Yeah.
trust me. I want him on here. Yes, very much so.
He is really entertaining. He has
Oh,
a way
he's
with
such a
words.
blast to talk to. He really is. But
I like it.
anyways, back to
Yeah.
what we were discussing. Back to the
Yeah.
topic of the show, morality.
I so again, I kind of agree with you. There's a sense in which I would say, apart from humanity, there's no way to know these concepts. But I,
Hmm.
I would then have to introduce the nuance that no, I still think that the mind of God knows these things because he knows himself. But then I'd have to get into other proofs on how do we know that there is this being, and that takes us into a completely different discussion.
Right.
So
Which
uh,
which I'm also happy to do, like
sure,
another show on
sure,
something
sure,
like
sure.
that
But,
with you.
but to not derail it, I'll just put that
Right.
qualification out there, and we can table it for now.
Hmm.
Um,
But like I was saying, let's just say that I'm granting that
mhm,
this deity exists for the
mhm.
purposes of discussion on this
Okay.
for this topic. If if God knows these things, if God knows these things about morality,
Mhm.
would that not make morality subject to the will of God?
No, and in fact, that's volunteerism, I believe. That particular view. It's not based on his will. I would not take that position. In other words, and this goes back to that discussion with Euthyphro and Socrates. They raise
Hmm.
this very question. Socrates raises this very question. I don't think it's because God wills it that makes it good. No, I think it's good because it is actually whatever this particular act is, it's reflective of this maximal being of goodness. He just is in and of itself, with apart from any kind of willing or judgments. He is that standard, and so I'm then able to take things, and I'm able to then measure something by him. Um, and there might be a whole lot involved in that process of
There is
reasoning.
quite a lot involved in that because I can think of some natural questions that might come along for
Mhm,
things like that. If he if he is this thing, if he is morality essentially,
mhm.
okay, that would make morality in and of itself arguably a thinking being.
Well, what we would say is this. We would say goodness, truth, beauty. They're called the transcendentals because they transcend every category, especially Aristotle's categories of being, substance, accidents.
Hmm.
They transcend these because we would just say being itself, just the concept of being as being, includes goodness, truth, beauty. There are different ways of speaking about being. Really, we can distinguish between the concepts of beauty, truth, and goodness. Don't get me wrong, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we would say they're coextensive with being itself. There's something about being itself that inherently includes the concept of goodness, and that's what I'm referring to here. It is using the term goodness a little bit differently than how you and I are using it when we speak about moral goodness, but I think the concept applies here. When we see goodness in beings, we can say that they are good, based on various things, but we can say that they are good insofar as they, if you will, participate in that maximal being of goodness. I need some kind of objective way to ground goodness and morality, because otherwise I think we end up in 100% relativism, and I don't think that that's sufficient. I think that that's, number one, impractical, but number two, it really puts me in a position to where I can never say that this act is always wrong for all cultures in all times. And there's something about that is disturbing to me. There's something about the concept that there is that I can't say it is wrong for this adult to kill this 2-year-old for simple pleasure. Something disturbing to me if all I can say is, well, I personally think it's wrong. That doesn't resonate well with me. Maybe it sits well with others. It doesn't work for me. Seems to me that we would have to have an objective standard by which we can say that's wrong, and that's what that natural sense of me is picking up on. I'm naturally picking up on the fact that we know that's wrong,
right? So,
and we know it's wrong.
Let's entertain a hypothetical here. I'm not saying I would agree with it being okay to do this at this point. However, we see issues of this kind of all the time. So you're talking about a person killing a 2-year-old purely because they want to.
For that reason only, I'm not considering.
Right, for that reason alone.
So I'm sure you could give me
person, 2-year-old killed, fun. Those pleasure. 4 components. So that's as close down to its essentials as we can break it. Correct?
I could actually reduce it further, but I'm gonna, at least for the moment, tentatively stick to an adult who has their rational faculties. Right.
I'm not arguing over the rational faculties. I'm just saying, breaking it down to these 4 key components: adult, kill, child, fun. Those 4 things. That's it. Okay. And this is kind of how you do things with science, is an attempt at falsification. Okay, how would we make it moral? How would we, or at the very least, how would we make it morally acceptable to do that thing?
I'll give you an example of where it would be morally acceptable for an adult to kill.
Okay,
it wouldn't be for fun though.
Oh no! We can't eliminate that category. We cannot eliminate that component.
Okay.
All 4 of those things have to be there
for fun.
Remember, if we're really going to attempt to, we're attempting to falsify this.
Sure.
So
offhand, first blush, I can't think of, but tentatively we'll go with it, and then I'll modify anything if you come up with a reason.
Here's my hypothetical.
Okay, let me hear it.
A video game.
Okay, I'm saying an actual human being and not a video game.
Right, but now you're adding an additional caveat, because that has never been part of the discussion to this point.
Beings, I'm assuming that you know what I'm talking about.
Right, but I'm saying it's like that's how we do that.
I understand, but I'm speaking here with the conventional term of human, assuming that you know what it means. If you're going to start doing that, that's fine. Let me make it even more specific. An actual, real human being, who is an adult, killing for pleasure, an actual real human infant.
Okay.
What do we do there? How do we make that right?
That's a good question. That's why we're having this discussion. I'm not sure we can, but at the same time, I'm not sure that those 4 things in reality can ever actually really coincide.
Man,
I'm not entirely convinced that they can.
On there have been people who have done this for the sheer purpose of pleasure. There have
Right.
been.
I'm agreeing with you that they've done this for that, but you also have put the caveat that they are rational.
Look, when it comes to rational, what I
Like,
mean by that
because
is
I'm willing to
they
bet that we could diagnose each and every one of those persons who ever did that with psychopathy.
I would say that there are instances in which people who do this, yeah, absolutely. But even if you could diagnose them with some kind of mental issue, that may not necessarily take away from the fact that they have full knowledge of what they're doing and full consent of the will. You can have all kinds of things going on psychologically,
Hmm.
I would posit, and still have full knowledge and full consent of what you're doing.
Okay.
Uh-huh. So I would say that yeah, you might be able to diagnose some of these people with particular things
I
that
would say
take
you could probably diagnose every single one of them as being some level of psychopath, and
even so, does that
in
take
in
away
in
their
dis,
consent of will? Does it take away their knowledge? I don't think so. And
well,
I
see,
would
that's
say
actually the big question that continues on throughout our legal system. It's a continuous
but
debate on what level
but
does a person's mental status
this is really irrelevant.
inform their level of
Let,
culpability.
let me show you why this is irrelevant. Because you're speaking about the individual's culpability. I'm putting that to the side. I'm not
Hmm.
talking about whether or not that person
Right,
is
but I'm
culpable.
questioning the person. I'm questioning the person's rationality
I'm
because they are
talking
a psychopath.
fact. Forget the person's culpability. You can assume all day long that they don't have culpability. That's fine with me. It
No, I
doesn't.
was just bringing that up as an example. That was an analogy. That wasn't a statement of what I'm talking about here. The overall statement is, I'm not convinced that a person is going to be completely rational in that circumstance.
I'll go ahead and accept your view there, your premise
because
that they're not
because
rational.
of
That's fine.
because of something like psychopathy or
That's fine.
some other mental
I'll go
malady.
ahead and
And so that's
agree.
going to be an extreme example. So I think we might need to find something a bit.
No, let's continue with this because I'm gonna go ahead and agree with you. I'm
Okay.
gonna go ahead and say that they don't have culpability. That's fine. It's not detracting from
No, no, no.
my.
I'm not even talking about culpability. I'm talking about rationality based
That's fine.
on mental illness.
That's exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about culpability.
Okay. Okay.
Let's say they're irrational. They don't know what they're doing.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. It's immaterial to what I'm saying because what I'm
Hmm.
saying is you're a rational person. I believe you are.
Okay.
You
I
as a
like to think
rational
so.
person can say that that act, not the person, that act is immoral. You can say that. I believe you can. So
Yeah, I can say that
that's what
I
I'm
can say
talking
that I
about.
find that to
For
be immoral.
anybody who
Yes.
is actually in possession of their cognitive faculties in a healthy way, they can say that this thing is objectively immoral. I believe that. I'm not saying there aren't some people who have a distorted mind and can't really make a good decision on what is right or
Hmm.
wrong. There are those cases. I'm saying people who are in possession of their rational faculties sufficiently adequately
Hmm.
are able to say that act is immoral. The act. I believe we can say that, but I only believe we can say that because
Well,
I
see,
believe
now,
it's an
now
objective
I
standard.
have to kind of nitpick here for a minute.
Mhm.
And this is not to be a jackass about anything. This is me honestly trying to arrive at the deepest part of this point that we can possibly get to, and that is you're saying that act.
Mhm.
Well, here's the thing: the only act that took place was the killing.
Mhm.
That's the
For
act.
fun.
So
For
no, no, no,
fun.
no. For fun is still an add-on to the act.
Yes.
Fun is not an action. Fun is an
Act
experience.
for fun.
Right. Okay. So killing
I'm
for
not.
fun.
I think that there are instances in which it would be permitted to kill an infant. I think that there are some instances. I mean, offhand, I can't give you any. Well, I can give you one, but I would have to introduce theism, of course, back into this. But
Are you
you
talking
know,
about Abraham and Isaac?
well, related definitely, and we can actually get into that and how I see this, consistently.
Hmm.
But putting that to the side, I'm saying that act for fun because I would agree that particular act of an adult killing an infant, there could be a
Well, but see,
case in
that's the
which
thing,
that's
though.
immoral.
But that's the
Yes, I'm
thing that
saying
I that
fun.
I'm nitpicking on
Mhm.
is adult and infant. Those are separate from the act. The act in and of itself is just killing.
No, here's what I
Because
mean.
so you're introducing particular categories to an act, to an
Here's what I
action,
mean.
to
When I'm
derive the
saying
morality.
act, I'm talking about the thing as a whole. I'm not talking about just
Okay.
literally the motion of stabbing or something like that.
Right. So this is a sequence of events.
Well,
So
it's not
we're looking at a
it's the thing
situation
as a
here.
whole.
Right.
Although I don't believe in situation ethics, if that's what you're trying to get to, but I'm just talking about the event as a whole. The person did this for fun. They didn't do it out of necessity. They did it for fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I say that that's wrong. Let me even just put it more hypothetically. Let's just pretend that a person could rationally, with full consent, do it for fun.
Okay.
Hypothetically, if that were possible, can I say that that would be immoral? Yes, I can. Does it ever happen? I don't know. You could say it does.
Right.
I'm just saying
You can say it's
hypothetically.
immoral, but at that point, what you're doing is what you're describing is something that is basically just situational ethics,
No,
because you're taking a particular situation and saying that that
no.
situation is always going to be wrong.
Here's why it's not situation ethics, because I'm not just grounding it in the situation. I would say there's an objective standard of morality. I don't agree with situation ethics. I would say I can say it's wrong, not because of a particular situation or a particular outcome, but because of an objective standard of morality. Otherwise, I think that you end
Okay,
up.
but the issue that we arrive at with that point is that if we're talking about an objective morality at that point, then the act of killing a 2-year-old would always be wrong, regardless of the
But
situation.
here's the thing. I don't think that the act of killing a 2-year-old is always wrong. If you just narrow
And
it down to
that
that, that's why I gave you particular qualifiers.
Right. And so at that point, you are forced to describe what is a specific situation.
It is a specific
That it has to be
situation.
for fun.
It is
It
a
has to be an
specific
adult. It
situation
has
that
to be killing. It has to be a 2-year-old.
it is a specific situation. That's not the same thing as the concept of situation ethics.
No,
It's
it's
not.
not the same thing as situational ethics as a whole. What I'm
No.
saying is that's an example of situational ethics, of which
I
you're
would
trying to
say
describe as objectively moral
I,
or
I would
immoral.
I would say there's an element of a situation here, sure. What I'm trying to guard against is the philosophy of situational ethics, which I wouldn't agree to because I do think that there is an objective standard of morality and other reasons. But again, that kind of goes into a completely different discussion, which we can have sometime. But my point is, assuming the person is in possession of their cognitive faculties, if they did this for fun, I think that we can say this is always wrong for those reasons. I think we can always say that. And I'm
So,
disturbed by a view that says we can't always say that in that
so
particular situation.
right. So I guess another question that I would have on that one is that how does it not ultimately end in something like moral absolutism?
Explain.
Like, if we're talking about moral absolutism, everything about morals, and this is one thing I'm going to go ahead and address with the comment section real
Mhm.
quick. It's my co-host Harry from the Sunday Show. He's chiming in. He's talking about saying that that's not morality, that is legality and ethics here and there. Okay, morality, morality, morals, whether it's absolutism, relativism, objectivism, those are ethical views. So ethics is the higher category in that regard.
And I
It's
can
all
address that
ethics.
particular topic too, if y'all,
Yeah.
if you want to get into it, because I would have a different take
We
on it.
might, and you know what, actually that would be something I would like to do as an entirely separate show and just call it morality versus ethics,
Mhm,
and kind of explain how morality is derived from ethics,
mhm, mhm,
or how they're intertwined. So
mhm.
saying that morality and something is morality but is not ethics, or is ethics and not morality, it really doesn't make much sense
Yeah,
when you actually
we
apply
might
some
be
thought
using
to
the
it.
terms a little differently. I see morality as something rooted in God, whereas ethics is
Hmm.
more term in relation to humans. You
Okay.
know,
But
um,
still, so what I'm
yeah.
asking about with the objectivism and
Hmm.
whatnot, and how it doesn't end up as moral absolutism at some point,
Hmm.
because absolutism, for anyone who doesn't know or who can't figure out from the name moral absolutism, it views all actions, each action specifically, is either always right or always wrong. It's an intrinsic thing.
I
So,
would say
so
that.
something would either always be immoral, even if it's done for, say, the well-being of someone else. Like it would always be wrong to what's something that's relevant today? Okay, it would still be morally wrong
Mhm.
for the older man in that church during that church shooting to stand up and shoot the aggressor in the head.
Mm. Yeah, no. See, I don't take that position because I would say that you know, when the Israelites went and dispossessed the land of the Canaanites, there were infants among them. In fact, I want to say Psalm, was it 139? One of them talks about, you know, how happy are, you know, those who smash their babies' heads on the rock, you know, all kinds of things. So it's
Mm-hmm.
clear they were killing infants.
Mm-hmm.
Is this in and of itself immoral? I would say in many instances, killing an infant is absolutely. In this
I would
particular
say that,
instance, how
even in
can
the
I say
service of a
it's
God,
not
smashing a
immoral?
kid's head against a rock would probably be a bad thing.
How can I say in this particular instance it's
Mm-hmm.
not? Here's the answer. I think Aquinas answers it very, very well. God is the author of life, but I have to introduce this ultimate standard of being. I
Mm-hmm.
have to introduce all of this. Apart from that, no, I can't talk about any of this. But with this, you know, idea of this ultimate standard of good, this ultimate being who is being himself, he is the author of life. He can determine when a person can or cannot live. He has that, and he has that right 100% morally because he is the author of life. So if he himself actually tells a person, you know, as a secondary cause, an agent, to go and do this, there's nothing immoral. But that agent, that person can't do it on their own initiative because they don't have that right to life. They're not the author of life. So they don't have that unless this particular being grants that to the person, grants that to them. But again, that rests on already the idea that we have God, that we have this objective thing.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to get into other reasons for why I believe that we have that. Without that, yeah, I mean, I'm I, you know, I don't know if I would really be ever able to give any kind of answer on why something is objectively right or wrong.
So let's explore that for a moment, though. Let's explore. I'm going to say, for the sake of discussion, just because it seems
Mhm,
like an interesting point, I'm going to
mhm,
grant the existence of the deity. I'm going to grant that the biblical account of this situation was accurate
mhm,
in the people smashing the head against rocks. God told them to
mhm,
do it. All that fun stuff. We're going to
mhm.
grant all that. So just because God said it was okay, that made it morally
No,
correct to kill the
not because
kids.
just because God says. No, no. Here's some presuppositional thing, and I'm not a presuppositionalist, but
I
I'm
know you're
using the
not. I
term
know how much we
presupposition
both
because
don't
I'm
like that.
assuming we're when we're speaking about this, I'm assuming some prior groundwork that we haven't really laid out in this particular show. One of those things is that this particular being who is being himself, that is the ultimate standard of goodness, cannot do anything that is not good. That's one of the things that we already have in our you know, in our view, our database that we're working with here, if you will, when I'm making these statements. But I'd have to
Hmm.
go and prove that, right? I'd have to go and prove that, hey, that there really is a being who is goodness itself and can never do an evil act. um I believe that that's the case, but I'd have to do a lot of work to show that and demonstrate that.
Okay.
But that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the position that this particular being cannot prescribe anything that is inherently immoral, morally immoral, um, morally evil. He can do what's called physical evils, you know, destroying things with hurricanes and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But he can't do anything morally evil, um, because that would be contrary to his very nature. He's just like I would say, this particular being who is being himself, who is omnipotent, cannot make a rock so heavy he can't pick it up.
Right. No, I've always
You
thought that
know,
was a stupid thought
but
experiment.
yeah, and but that's essentially the same thing. If
Hmm.
we were to say that this being who is goodness itself can prescribe something that's evil, you know, in and of itself, that's immorally evil, inherently, innately,
Right.
no,
We
no,
eventually arrive at the
he
point
can't.
of the Euthyphro dilemma.
But I would say that it is based on himself, who he is, not a judgment, not what he says, but his being itself. He is this maximal being of goodness, and he can do nothing other than good. What good is, we'd have to then go and discuss all that, but sure, I would say
Right, and so that's what it kind of gets to the point of. It's like, okay, how is that goodness retained in the event of smashing a kid's head on a rock?
and that's a
So
fair
how is
question.
that? Yeah.
And that's a fair question because you and I are both repulsed by that initially.
Oh no, I'm not gonna say initially. I'm gonna say like completely. I'm like, a deity himself could show up and say, it's like, hey, I want you to smash that kid's head on the rock. No.
I would say that we would both be repulsed, and there would be a natural
Yeah,
repulsion to that initially.
I can honestly say I would look at whatever authority
Yeah,
stepped in front of me and said, "Hey, I
right.
really, really want you. I command you. I demand
Mhm.
this of you on your own life. Smash that kid's head on a
Especially
rock."
in today's
I can't do that.
context, because I don't think that this particular being that we're speaking about would do that at this
Hmm.
state in divine revelation. But no, I get where you're coming from. But here's how I would try to defend this. I would say that, um, when it comes to this particular being, how could there ever be an instance in which this could be good? Me as a limited person, I can give you some theories. They might be inadequate, but that doesn't take away from the fact that this omnipotent, omniscient being might know some things and good reasons for it that I
Right,
might
and
not
just to
aware
kind
of.
of put this,
But
just kind of
I'll take a stab at it. I'll give
right.
you
Well, and just to put this caveat out there, it's like I'm not expecting this to be like some, you know, flagrant like scholarly discussion. This is designed to just kind of be a meeting of the minds, two laymen just sitting here having a
yeah, you and I
conversation.
didn't rehearse any of this. We didn't
No,
discuss any
no,
of it
this
in
is
advance.
entire.
Sure.
That's why I love doing this show the way I do it. Is because I purposefully
Yeah.
I do not prepare
Yeah,
anything
neither
beforehand.
did I. I unfortunately didn't have any time, but no, I
But
like
no,
it
that's
because you and
okay.
I are having a good conversation. So I actually
Exactly.
enjoy this format.
But there, I mean, we
Um,
both also host shows, so it kind of helps
right.
a little bit that we already kind of use the
We
public
have some
speaking.
experience at
Right.
that.
Anyway,
Right.
anyway, your stab at
But
defending this. We got a
let
couple of
me
minutes
give
before we go into
you
questions.
let me give you a reason why I believe it is possible why could be okay. But
Okay.
my argument doesn't stand or fall on my limited knowledge. I could be wrong, and there could be some
Hmm.
others and I'm unaware of. Here's why. I think that some of those Canaanites, if not all of them, could have grown up and done things to the Israelites that would have gone against God's very purpose in what he was doing with them, which was to bring about the Messiah through them. Perhaps, if they allowed them to live, that would have somehow taken away from his very plan to bring about the Messiah through the Jews. And so, what if those children grew up and killed all the Jews and there are none left, and therefore you don't have the Messiah born from those people which God had already previously beforehand promised would be born among them, which he did in Deuteronomy. So
Okay.
I would say, okay, for that's just one particular reason they would have grown up.
And I guess probably one of the counters that a person might bring to that
Mhm.
is, okay, given that same kind of path of logic there,
Mhm.
then that would make it morally okay for if I had the opportunity to um, go back in time and shoot baby Hitler in the face.
But not in every instance. Here's the thing: if God gave you that the green light on that, because again, it's God who is the author
I'm pretty sure it
of
would take
every
that to achieve
particular
time
life.
travel.
Right, but of every particular life. So God has to give you the green light on that particular person. And just because he allowed it for the Canaanites for that purpose that I just gave doesn't mean that he would necessarily give it for another person where that reason doesn't apply. So he would have to, as the author of life, he would have to give you the green light. Now, if God gave you the green light to go and shoot Hitler, baby Hitler, in your time machine, hey, I'm all for it. I don't have a problem with that. But it is God who is the author of life, and it is he who gets to determine that. Now, he himself has also given the green light to the state. If a particular person commits a capital punishment, the state carries the sword, as the book of Romans talks about. So I
So
would say that,
let's go back to the shooting baby Hitler in the face thing though.
yeah.
Just so now that Now that we've broken that barrier down just a little bit for just a brief moment, because there's not all
Yeah,
that many questions,
yeah.
is we're going to bring the fun aspect back into it.
Uh-huh.
We're going to take this same person. We're going to take the individual that we were talking about that was killing a 2-year-old for fun.
Uh-huh.
We're going to put them in a time machine and put them in front
Hmm.
of 2-year-old Hitler.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So
Let
could
me
we
answer
could,
that.
could we consider that
Let
now
me answer that.
at least morally
Yeah.
acceptable
Two things going on here at this
if we
point.
know all the things that we know now
Two
about what
things
would
going on
happen?
here at this point. We're no longer limited to those four parameters that we restricted ourselves to
Right,
before.
right. We've
Now we
removed
have an
the.
additional
I
element.
would I would
That is
not say
Hitler.
we've removed the innocence factor
We
because
have
baby Hitler has
we
not
have
done any of the things that Hitler did.
we have not removed them. We've
Right,
added to them because we know that this person's going to grow up and go and do what Paul
right,
did.
exactly. We've
So,
added a
so,
caveat of knowledge.
so now we've added this. It's already different because you've added that.
Hmm.
Number two, I would say that a person can commit a good act with bad intentions and God will judge them for their intentions. Even though the act in and of itself was good, their intentions were bad. I'll give you a perfect example. You look at the book of Isaiah, to bring scripture into this thing. You can take it or leave it. You don't have to agree with it. But to give you a biblical example, you have the Assyrians who are coming to judge the Israelites by God's providence. God has basically brought those Assyrians to go and do this, to go and judge the Israelites for their sins and to kill all these people and bring them into captivity and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Now, he himself says that he raised up the Assyrians, but then he goes and says that he's judging the Assyrians because not only did they just want to do this as the instrument of God, they had bad intentions, they had evil intentions, they had sinful intentions in their heart when they committed this act. So even though God raised them up to commit the act, their intention was bad. So we can also discuss elements of intention because I think this does come into play at some point where you
Hmm.
can do a good act, you can do something that in and of itself is good, but with bad intentions. God won't judge the act, but he will judge the intentions of the heart.
Okay,
But again,
so
that presupposes a God and all that.
right, but there again, also it kind of comes back to looking at the inverse of that,
Mhm.
doing something bad with good intentions, and then we go back to the old adage of the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Mhm. Now, and I would say there's reasons why it doesn't work in the opposite direction because when it comes to a moral act, we would include the thing that is done, the intentions, the means. There's more to it than that, and all of them have to be good for it to really be what we
Well,
would
at that point, we're kind of breaking out from what an act is at that
consider.
point
Mhm.
by encompassing the
Yeah,
intention, the outcome, and all those things. And
yeah.
so
We're
at that
talking about
point,
the things.
you're breaking even from the philosophical consideration of what an act is. For
We're
instance,
just
like,
using the term differently here. Yeah.
yeah, because the way I see an act, and at least the way I've always kind of understood it from the philosophy classes that I've taken two. I took one on logic and one on intro to philosophy.
Mhm.
So I know enough to be dangerous.
Mhm. But we're talking about a moral act here, and there is a debate here because some people will say that okay, if the thing that is done is good, but the intentions or the means were bad, it's still good overall. There is a
Hmm.
debate here. I'm taking the position that all of these things, what is done, the intention, the means that were brought to accomplish that end,
Hmm.
all have to be good for the overall thing to be good. And if any one of those things is bad, the entire thing as a whole is bad. But it doesn't work the opposite way as you mentioned there. You have to have all three good for the whole thing. But again, you'll find guys who would disagree with me on that, and we can get into that discussion and debate does the intention have to be good for the entire act, if you will. If you
Right,
want to just
because
talk about
like if
what is
if we're talking about the entire act has to be, the intention has to be good because that kind of delves into a weird form of moral absolutism in that for any one act to be good, every aspect of it must be. The act itself the intention behind it
and means.
and the means.
Mhm.
So at that point, if you're looking at moral absolutism, well, then theft would always be wrong because the act in
So
and of itself is considered
let's talk about
bad.
theft, because this is the other issue that Aquinas brings up when it
Hmm.
comes to these very things. He brings up the killing of the infants in the Old Testament, and he also brings up theft because the Israelites plundered Egypt when they left them. They took all their gold and stuff with them. All right, why can I say that it was okay for them to steal, but it's not okay for me to just go and break in somebody's house and take their stuff? Where's the consistency here? Okay, here's the consistency. God is not only the author of all life, he's also the author, or not, well, let me not say author, owner of all possessions. He owns all those things. He owns all the gold. He owns everything that is here. So if God tells you you can go and take it, he personally gives you the green light, you can do it. Just like if I tell you, hey, you can take one of my books, that's fine. But if somebody else doesn't give you that, somebody else gives you that permission, and then you take it, that's stealing. So again, God who owns all things, he can give the Israelites, so there would be instances in which you could say theft would be moral. If God, who owns all things, tells you you can go and take it, in that particular case.
I'm not trying to be flippant about this when I say this, but and I would have to look this up. I want to say that what you're talking about was argued as a potential legal defense during a copyright claim when I think it was a Christian artist like deliberately ripped off everything from a secular one. I want to say this defense
said
was
that
used.
God told him he could go and do it. Is that what he said?
I swear I'm
See, here's
almost
the
in
thing.
I'm almost certain that
I'm assuming
that
God
happened.
spoke to the Israelites. I'm assuming that. Why am I
Right.
assuming it? We'd have to go into all that. I'm assuming for the moment that God, the author of all life, the owner of all possessions, actually spoke to the Israelites. If he didn't speak to the Israelites, they were wrong for going and doing what they did in Canaan. They were wrong for taking from the Egyptians, even though they were there under subjugation and stuff. They were wrong. If God didn't tell them, if the Bible's wrong, and this somehow happened historically, they were wrong for doing that. I'll give you that all day long. I'm assuming for the moment that the God of the scriptures actually gave them the green light on these things. Why do I believe in the Bible? Why do I believe in divine revelation? Why do I think these things happen? Completely different discussion.
Yes. So I think now we're going to go ahead and try and get into questions or looking at comments, things like that. I'll address this because I did talk about physics a little bit. Harry says velocity is relative, acceleration is not. No. He says acceleration is not relative, it's objective. Acceleration still happens within an inertial framework. Motion as a whole is still relative. Even an other I'm assuming means objects in motion will see the same change in velocity during the same time period. What's subjective is the direction. Okay, no. Harry, go watch a video. Go to Professor Dave Explains and watch him talk about motion is relative. That will probably explain things better than I would be able to, considering he's an actual professor. So, then he introduces the question, going back to the whole killing for fun and all that. Says to save the lives of 5 other infants that need those body parts.
No,
I mean, that kind of like at that point you have to dismiss the fun part of it.
and then means to an end. I would say the means to
Right,
that
becomes a teleological argument at that point. Is do the ends justify the means?
and I would say no.
Okay.
I would say the means have to be good as well.
Okay. Yeah, Gregorian pipes up and challenges him on that and says that wouldn't just be for fun, though, and he's right. Harry asks, do psychopaths have morality, or can we exclude their views as faulty? So they have views on morality, yes. However, what they consider right and wrong is different from how just about everybody else sees right and wrong.
But
So
is it so different that they are no longer culpable?
that's when we get into the whole issue of legal ethics on that one. And we have a test, like we actually have tests for how we determine culpability based on intention and things like that, and also including mental illness, because at least in Texas, there are components to a crime. So part of that is, what is this individual's level of intent? And you have differing levels. You have intentionally, which is the highest level of intent. You have knowingly, meaning you know someone intended to do this, or you knew your actions would cause harm or had the potential to cause harm, even if you didn't intend for it. So you have intentionally, knowingly. Negligently, and then with no, and with criminal negligence is the last one. I can't remember the third one. Damn it.
I mean, I would have.
But anyways, like you have those four levels of intent, and one of my professors, I love this comparison. In all honesty, when someone asked him recklessly, intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, or with criminal negligence. Recklessly just means you're being an idiot, but not so much of an idiot that you don't know what you're doing. And then criminal negligence is referred to, at least by one of my professors, as aggravated dumbass. Mm-hmm. And so that's when you go get into the whole legal aspect of things of, okay, does this person's mental state eliminate them from being intentional to cause harm?
This
And this,
is
that, and the
all
other.
determined by our standard here in Texas or wherever.
Right.
My question is bigger than that, because we could be completely wrong in the way we're determining all of
Well,
this.
that's what I'm saying is, like, when we're talking about the psychopaths and their culpability and this, that, and the others, like from a legal aspect, we have a test for that. And we have to test them in such a way as to where they do not know that what they are doing.
But, you know, some things could be legal, but they're still wrong, you know, and that person could, let's say we just did not, you know, measure the situation well enough, and they got away legally, but they still
That's a
had enough
possibility,
culpability there, or, you know,
Right.
they,
No,
they knew better.
that's a possibility. It's
Yeah.
not likely to happen in Texas because, I mean,
Right.
we're quicker to send them to a lethal injection chair than we are to a psych ward.
But I'm just saying, you know, our standards might not be very, very perfect or perfect.
No, I would argue that there is no real perfect standard. Like we have no evidence of a perfect standard. Because our system constantly and consistently changes. The only thing we can guarantee about our legal system is that it changes.
Yeah, you know, in any particular instance where this, you know, these people have this or that diagnosis, I can't really speak to that. But what I can say is, if the person has adequate knowledge,
of sound
if
mind,
the person has adequate consent of will, then, you know, this results. But whether this particular person has it, I don't know.
But he also asks, like, can we exclude their views as faulty? It's like, well, when we talk about moral relativism, then yes, we would exclude their views as faulty because they do not mesh with with the culture as a whole, with the majority, essentially, because it's outside. It is something that is considered abnormal to the relative moral framework that you're currently operating under. And so that's how, even in moral relativism, a psychopath's views or a psychopath's concept of morality would still be excluded. So
within that relative framework.
Right. And so, unless, you know, the psychopath is in charge of the relative framework, in which case, well, now you have a different thing going on. But there again, that's why I say it's relative to particular frameworks.
Are you big into Star Trek? The Next Generation, particularly? By any chance?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
Are you big into Star Trek The Next Generation by any chance?
Oh yeah, I used to love that show.
Maybe even the original series. But
Original series I was okay with, but in all honesty, and I'm gonna catch a lot of hell from Trekkies. I'm sorry, Picard was Patrick Stewart was better than Shatner.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
All right, so we're going down in flames together on this one,
I'm
Mike.
with you. I hate the original series. I hate Shatner. I like Patrick Stewart. But my point in bringing it up is they always go to these different alien planets, and they encountered one place where it was wrong to step on the grass, and they're Wesley or something for it because he stepped on the grass, but he didn't know. But of course, ignorance of the law isn't
is not a defense. Is not a defense thereof. Yeah.
They always have these episodes that raise these philosophical and moral questions.
That's one of the reasons why I love TNG so much, is because it made everyone think.
Gene Roddenberry was a genius. I think he was a secular humanist, so I don't agree with where he was coming from, but he was a genius insofar as he knew that these would elicit, controversy.
It would provoke thought.
Yeah, exactly. It would provoke thought.
Yeah. And so that's why I liked Star Trek: The Next Generation better than things like Battlestar Galactica or Babylon 5.
Absolutely.
Babylon 5 was a good show, but nothing raised the questions of real discussion like Next Generation and Deep Space Nine did.
DS9 was excellent. Voyager, I loved Voyager personally. I know a lot of
Voyager was good. Discovery sucks.
Right. But the TNG, the Next Generation,
it's the quintessential. Like it is the quintessence of thought-provoking.
Because it goes into all these issues.
It really does.
We might need to do a show one day on abortion. If so, I can bring up the episode where Deanna Troi became impregnated by this alien being against her consent, and Worf was suggesting that they should kill.
That would be something that I might be more interested on bringing on, say, like my other channel that I'm going to be starting, that I'm still in the beginning phase of getting started up, called the Political Reformation, and we can probably talk about it there, because just the sheer political ramifications just entrenched in that issue.
Yeah.
Though it wouldn't be though on here it wouldn't be completely out of line to say bring up like when they had the trial of Lieutenant Commander Data as to whether or not he was alive. He was
That's
a person.
That's
because it talks about personhood.
Yes.
And so that would be something that I think would be really interesting to talk about.
It would. Because it raises a lot of questions. You're right. What is a being who is sentient, and
right? How do we define sentience? Life. How do we define what is personhood? Yeah.
What was the first directive or whatever that you're
the prime directive?
The prime directive, wasn't it that they're not supposed to interfere with lives, or something?
Yeah. And then they do nothing but that entirely.
Yeah.
So, okay, going through the rest of it, everything else we kind of talked about, Harry brings up another question. Is obeying God fun? I was like, but that doesn't change whether or not you would view it as moral. The fun isn't really an intrinsic aspect of it, I wouldn't think. So... goofy question. If you want to go for it, go for it. Otherwise, I don't see how it's really a relevant one to the topic of morality. But hey,
what do we mean by fun? What do we mean by fun?
What do we mean by fun? Well, I mean, like
it all hinges on that. If you mean that it is something that is supposed to be joyful.
Let's just. I'm just going to Google the definition for the word fun. Okay,
it might be entertaining. It probably means entertaining. Is obeying God
probably
fun?
Does.
Entertaining.
So enjoyment, amusement, or lighthearted pleasure.
I would say not in all cases, because God would require sometimes people to do certain things that require great sacrifice. So not always fun if we use that particular example. Or that
right. Right. I mean, like I could have answered that one from the theistic perspective, but it was more fun to have you do it.
Yeah.
And he said it was in relation to the Abraham example. So okay,
Would that have been fun? No.
yeah,
That would have been a great sacrifice. Pun intended.
yeah. And then Harry's a tricky.
Is he okay? Good. I
Yeah,
like that.
he brought up the actual prime directive, which he says is do not interfere with a culture that has not discovered warp
They
drive.
haven't discovered warp. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So what they would deem a primitive culture, essentially.
There was another episode too where they were trying to determine what is life, and there were these nanobots that they discovered.
Uh-huh.
You know, this nanotechnology, and there were all kinds of them that were just duplicating like crazy. And it turns out that they were actually trying to kill this particular person because he was all kinds of the nanobots. So they then had to discuss, you know, what is life, and they came to the conclusion that these little nanobots were alive. So yeah, it raises some really good questions. What is life? That would probably make
Another there's also another one was an episode called Half a Life.
yeah.
It was a morality play about how society deals with the elderly. That was when Picard saved a scientist who was based on what I'm seeing here. It says Picard risks a war when he grants asylum to a scientist bent on saving his planet's son while trying to defy a fatal societal tradition.
Was this the one where he was gonna marry Deanna Troy's mother or something? But he,
I think maybe.
I think one. I think
I think so.
But it might be the guy, because I think the guy who was in love with Deanna Troy's mom or something, he was going to have to go kill himself because his society says at this particular age.
Yeah. In this episode, Troy's mom falls in love with Timothy, played by David Ogden Stiers,
so
a Kalan scientist who is attempting to test his theories of stellar ignition in hopes of saving his world's dying star.
Per this culture, at a particular age, you have to kill yourself. You can't live. And she's saying, that's wrong. That's stupid. Y'all's culture is messed up. You know, so it brings up this whole discussion of, how can we judge another culture without objective morality? So it raises all these.
Well, you're right, but still, that's the thing that we run into, is that the same thing that Picard keeps saying, because Picard was a moral relativist. At his core, every time he made a moral judgment about something, he boiled it down to, I can't judge them for what they do, for what they consider moral. I can only equate it as to what I see as moral and make a judgment based on that.
Because Gene Roddenberry, who's writing the script, is a secular humanist, so it's reflected in Picard's view.
True.
That's why I say I don't agree with it.
You may not agree with it, but we have Gene Roddenberry himself essentially gifted us with all these different circumstances in which we could look at these things and see how things might play out. But
it didn't really actually start. You know where you see this a lot? Some of the very same themes and topics, Twilight Zone.
Oh, yeah, Rod Serling, hands down. Yes. Absolutely.
A lot of what's going on in TNG, you watch it, it mirrors what's going on in Twilight Zone. And
yes, it does.
All these questions there too.
Oh, Rod Serling is still one of my favorite, just hosts of a show of all time.
He's a genius.
Yeah, he really was. Another person would be, he didn't really do a whole lot of hosting, but I wish he would have, because he would have been phenomenal at it, and that was Vincent Price.
Man, I loved his stuff where he goes over the Tall Tale Heart. He goes.
Oh yes, when he was doing his readings of Poe. Oh my gosh,
what was the
Cask of Amontillado?
There it is.
Yeah,
I loved it
when he was just going over Poe. Yes, it was so good. One of my favorite readings that he did was I can't remember the
one. He did that one really well. You know, when pendulum's going to
yes, that's what it was. The Pit and the Pendulum. That's the one I was thinking of. Yes.
Yeah.
That was so well done.
The way he introduced the whole thing, his tone, the whole cadence to it.
Price Yeah, I swear it's like there's something there's a correlation between people with the last name Price and their just overall cult of personality, because you got Vincent Price and you got Bob Price, and we're seeing a lot of parallels here, just with
Something about
New Testament education, philosophy, and theology versus entertainment and horror stories. I don't know. Obviously flawed logic there, but hey, you never know.
There could be something behind that.
You call it the
It could be an objective element to the Price gene or something.
Call it the Price postulate or something.
Right. That'll work. I like it.
Yeah. And they told us to avoid alliteration always.
Right.
It works so well.
Indeed.
But yeah, no. In all honesty, I kind of took a page from Dr. Price's book when, to tell you like what kind of an influence he's had even on me. Just that discussion with him when he was talking about the way he came up with titles for things. Mm-hmm. That honestly changed how I looked at making titles for YouTube videos.
What did he say?
When he was talking about like creating creative, snazzy, just catchy titles, he's like that was his favorite part of the whole bit of it was just the creating of fancy titles. And every time he came up with a really just kind of a gem of a title, he would want to write a book just based on that. Like, Jesus Christ Superstition as a play off of the show, right? Or his rhyming when he talks about Paul or Pauline aspects. He's writing a book or has a chapter in a book called The Colossal Apostle.
Yeah.
I mean, so I kind of put little bits of that here and there through my.
What's the title of this one?
In all honesty, this one I'm keeping pretty straightforward because these are designed to be at least not necessarily purely educational, but at least moderately informative. Mm-hmm. And so not so much focused on entertainment as it is focused on conveying topics that people find difficult to talk about. Mm-hmm. But my episode titlings for my the Sunday service with Harry and whatnot, I've got some pretty nifty titles on, I think. Mm-hmm. Like the most recent one we did last Sunday, the three things we were talking about involved the riots and protests going on in India over the CAA and NRC bills that had passed into legislation, as well as some goofy stuff going on in Oklahoma about how they were that they were passing at a state level an $85,000 expenditure to put a plaque that says "In God We Trust" in every state building, and there's over 300 of them. Mm-hmm. And so, with all that, I entitled it "Riots and Okies and Battles, Oh My." Mm-hmm. 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 Then going back further on, when it was talking about whether or not atheists can go to heaven despite being atheists, and so I just titled that show "Do All Atheists Go to Heaven?" Just kind of like a spoof of "All Dogs Go to Heaven." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of put that aspect into it, and I've actually enjoyed making the videos more because now I get to think and like, okay, how can I twist this to make a goofy ass title that'll at least make somebody laugh?
I like it.
Yeah. But anyway, we're almost at the hour and a half mark, so if you've got other things you need to do, I think we've pretty much talked. Yes, and Harry just reminded me. You probably haven't been exposed to this because I don't think you watched the Sunday service. Harry's talking about soy sauce in the chat. There's a reason for this. During one of the shows, I found an article that was a scientific study that showed that the testicles and the anus the perineum can detect. They actually have taste buds, and they can detect essences of flavor to a certain extent. And so at one point we were talking about that, and the topic came up was like, great, now some stupid college frat boy is going to sit there and like stick a bottle of soy sauce in his ass and try to see if he can taste it. And so I made the Atheist Reformation PSA of the week. It was just, please don't butt chug soy sauce. And so that kind of became a running theme, as I would make some just really horrible public service announcement,
Right.
just for sheer entertainment value. Call it my Howard Stern phase. I don't know if you but then there was another one like the next week where I can't remember if it was Harry that proposed this article or somebody else, but there was something brought up that there was some like offshoot religious group that thought that if a mother engaged in certain acts of sexual congress while pregnant, that it would make the child come out either gay or lesbian or whatever. And so I was like, no, this is just stupid. And so to treat it with the stupidity that it deserved to be treated with, I made a PSA for the week for that one. It says, no, mommy's butt stuff won't make you gay. Just to kind of illustrate the stupidity of the belief in that regard. Because it gets down to it, and this will kind of be kind of my closing point for the day, because I know you got to get going. And that's people in and of themselves. People are deserving of respect. But that doesn't mean a person's ideas or beliefs are also worthy of respect. And so, for instance, I respect you as a person. I enjoy hanging out with you. You're a cool guy. I enjoy doing these live streams with you. That doesn't necessarily mean I respect Roman Catholicism as a whole. I don't have to respect that belief to have a good discussion with you.
Sure.
And that's another reason why I made this whole flipping channel, was just to kind of illustrate you don't have to respect a person's beliefs to respect a person.
Yeah, I mean, you can judge a person's argument and still have, that has nothing to do with the person. Right?
Exactly. And so many people seem to be kind of disconnected from that and don't really seem to get that. My
Criticize an argument all day long has absolutely nothing to do with what you think about that person.
Exactly.
It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it, I would say.
No, I would say it shouldn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
I mean, it's like, again, I think you're cool. I like talking to you. I enjoy talking to everybody in the RNT Facebook group. Doesn't mean I respect their beliefs.
Right.
But I still respect them because they're good people.
Yeah, there's definitely a distinction there.
Right, exactly. I mean, otherwise, if our level of respect was entirely tailored to how we treat each other's beliefs and everything,
right?
Oh boy, I'd have been kicked out within 2 hours.
A lot of people equate those things.
They do, and I think that's a really good reason for having channels like mine and like yours to show that we can still be friendly in our interactions, and while still cutting each other to ribbons when it comes to our ideas.
Because you can critique an argument without having anything to do with the person themselves. Sure.
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah, the best way I could find to describe it is that it's just to illustrate to a person, look, just because in our discussion I took your little idea baby and shot it in the face does not mean I did that to you. That just means I did it to your idea. And people don't seem to get that. And that's another reason why I'm starting that other channel, the Political Reformation, to kind of go hand in hand with this one, to have those bridging the gap kind of discussions between people and show them it's like, look, you can think that view is stupid. And depending on the view, I would probably agree that it's a stupid view. That doesn't mean you got to be a jackass to them.
Right. Sure. You're preaching to the choir here.
All right. You know what? Here's the problem, though. I may be preaching to the choir, but the choir is awful damn small, and we got a really low turnout, and we need to fix that.
I hear you. There's not a lot of people that are really interested in truth. They're not really interested in some of these things. They're just more interested in
right. Yeah, they're interested in the entertainment aspect of it, and that's fine. I can be entertaining, but I'm gonna beat you over the head with some knowledge at the same time, just because they need it. Oh, so poor sweet summer children, do they need it? Uh, uh, but anyways, I would say that kind of wraps things up for this afternoon. One little shout out to my younger brother Matthew. He just jumped in the chat saying "little bro" to big bro. So hello. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it and hope you can tune in tomorrow. That being said, everybody, please go and check out Reason and Theology. They're a bigger channel than I am, but I'm still going to plug them anyway because I like hanging out with and talking to each and every one of those guys. Link to the channel is down in the description below, even above my own shameless self-promotional links. Mike, was there any other information you wanted to leave with people before we kind of close this out?
No, you put in the plug. And again, thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed this discussion. It was really fun.
Absolutely. I'm sure there's some upcoming stuff on there. Quick little update. Yes, we are having Sunday service tomorrow at 12, and Harry's going to be on. We're going to talk about some interesting things. Y'all probably have seen the title of it. The theme is going to be the separation of church and state, most likely. And also, for anybody who watches me here but doesn't necessarily watch Reason and Theology, I will be on a roundtable discussion with the Reason and Theology crew on April the 18th, and I think we're doing that show at noon, correct?
Correct. That is
and
correct.
what's the theme of that one? What's the theme of that one again?
That one is going to be on God known through reason and revelation.
Okay, so Reason and Revelation roundtable on Reason and Theology, April 18th at noon. So anybody who watches here that doesn't watch on that channel, tune in there. You'll see me there too. All that being said, Mike, go ahead and say bye to the people and I'll close it out.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for having me on. Everyone, thank you for watching too. Please contact me if you have any further questions. You can just go to reasonandtheology.com. There's a contact page there if you have any questions about anything I said.
All right. Well, as with everything else, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow the Atheist Reformation on Facebook at the link that is scrolling across your screen right now. If you have any information or you want to talk about something, be on the show, propose an article to go on the Sunday service show, you can send it to this email, theatheistreformation@gmail.com. And as always, I'm your host, Drew. Thank you for tuning in, and everybody have a great rest of your Saturday.